culture with worldviews which once would have been considered inconceivable but are now considered honorable, a small voice cries out in the wilderness. A voice which is unwilling to surrender to the demands or the madness of the woke culture. This voice may be small, and yet it holds great power. Power that cannot be weighed on the scales of a godless culture, but power that will nonetheless stand the test of time, because it is the truth. Welcome, Pilgrims, to the Pugnacious Pilgrim Podcast. We are glad you are here with us today, and we are hopeful that you will walk away informed, enriched, and equipped to live as pilgrims in a brave new world.
Well, Mike, of all the times that we have ever tried to convince people we're living in a brave new world, tonight might be the night where we actually say it and mean it.
Yeah, I know that I'm feeling brave and new, and the world is feeling brave and new. So
yeah, uniquely new.
Uniquely new.
Hopefully brave.
Say that 10 times fast.
Hopefully brave. I'll say that. Give some context, man.
Yeah, so today President Biden had a speech where he essentially said that he was going to start enforcing somehow companies that have 100 or more employees to mandate vaccines or mandate COVID testing like once a week or something like that. And as well as a bunch of additional things that he claims that he has the authority to do, which I love that he had to like remind everybody, I do have the authority to do this. But really kind of put a damper on things today.
Yeah.
Like I was having a good day, and then I actually got a text from the worship director of our church like, dude, are you watching this? I'm like, no, why? And then he told me what was going on, and I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm officially an enemy of the state, and that's pretty punk rock. So
yeah, well, that's
I'm all right
true.
with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember which member of the Sex Pistols came out and said it, but the fact that it's the conservative right that is actually punk rock now is blowing his mind,
Right.
And rightfully so. But yeah, just crazy stuff, man. I mean, I can't understand it. I can't believe it. Like this is our America, folks. And so if you're wondering, pilgrims, why we are telling you to be pugnacious and stay pugnacious, this is why. I know that some people will probably hear this news and be excited about it. I know that some people will hear this news and say, finally. But what I want to ask what I would encourage you to ask yourself is, why are you encouraged by this? Is it because it matches with what you've been told? Does it match with what your preferences are? Or does it line up with the Constitution of the United States of America? And,
Right.
We are building back better towards a tyranny that we've never seen definitely in my lifetime, and it's pretty scary. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, I agree. And, I'm getting into a lot of discussions with folks that seem to think that tyranny is the answer.
Yeah.
Because they're like, people, if you're ever on the side that is like, we know better than you, and we're going to make this decision for you, or else, you're probably not on the right side.
Yeah, and I guess, the point that we've been trying to maybe preach from the very beginning is, we kind of kicked this thing off on Inauguration Day, and so it's been directly tied to President Biden and under his presidency and administration. But what we've seen in the last even 30 days, just 30 days alone, is completely ridiculous. It's just crazy. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, things are moving at such a rapid pace that I think people don't even have a chance to really recognize how quickly we've come in just such a short amount of time. And it's kind of alarming. And so what I would say, and I read a blog post a couple weeks ago by Pastor Doug Wilson out of Moscow, Idaho. Blog, and Mayblog is the name of that blog, and I would highly recommend it, encourage it. We're not necessarily endorsing it, but I would say without a doubt that it's something that people that are trying to understand a worldview from a Christian point of view, something that I would definitely recommend reading. But he had a blog post talking about don't take the bait, and in case you didn't hear me, don't take the bait. what happened January 6th with the attempted coup, insurrection, whatever kind of language you want to use. He is outright in saying it was stupidity. What they were marching for or towards was great. It needed to be said. He's a firm believer that there was nefarious business going on around the election. So he's not, against their stance, but the thing that, the way that it escalated and then the way that it was able to be misrepresented by the media has and so his point is don't not be angry. Like, now is the time to resist. Now is the time to be angry, but just be careful because some folks are trying to get us to take the bait.
Yeah, that's true. At the same time, though, I was actually kind of encouraged by the fact that like people actually did go to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Our country was like founded on things like
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
We were definitely kind of raging against the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Good band, by the way.
Yep.
So I don't know. I'm not one to call for violence. I don't want that responsibility, right? But when I see that that people are really finally getting fed up and they know who to take the fight to, that's encouraging to me.
Yeah.
Because I really think that the government, specifically these politicians that like live in their ivory towers, man, they were scared and shaking in their boots when just a bunch of unarmed people showed up.
Yeah.
They didn't know what to do. Why? Because they never have to actually confront the people that they're making the laws for.
Right.
So I thought that was a good thing.
Yeah,
And I hope it continues to happen.
Right. And I think, my understanding is he would make an appeal towards that as well. It's just some of the silliness of, sitting in Nancy Pelosi's chair and, some of that stuff.
There were a lot of really dumb people that were there.
Right.
For sure. But they were also probably dumb enough to actually do something. I'm not condoning their behavior while they were in the Capitol or storming the building or anything like that. But for sure, people are getting upset. What's going to happen? Right. And that's kind of where I would like to go with this is like, if they want to mandate vaccines and we keep saying no, really the thing they're going to have to resort to is violence.
Yeah.
Right. They're going to have to force us to do it. What if we keep saying no? Is it okay if we retaliate? Well, I guarantee you that if we do retaliate, we're going to be the ones that have to take the fall. We're going to be the ones that are painted as the crazy people, and we're going to be the ones remembered in history as the losers if we get beat. Right?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just like riding high on the fact I watched Braveheart like a couple weeks ago, but it certainly seems like this is something that gets written is just like the machine just steamrolls over like these independent movements, and then these fringe independent movements just get labeled as radicals, and then we move on with history and people continue to just give up their rights.
Right, and I think that's why, we would encourage people to be pugnacious. Pugnacious means, not only to have convictions, but to fight for those convictions, to be brave in a time where I think really, the cultural wins as they're being measured and as the voices are being propagated or whatever on social media and other places would seem to paint a picture as if we are a minority. But in every reality that's measurable, okay, even if you go back to the election itself, the minority, even if you don't believe that there was any nefarious activities going on around voting, the minority is not a small minority. The minority is a minority that has a voice, and that voice should be heard. And unless that minority is willing to be strong and courageous and act like men and stand firm, we will continue to be pushed. We see that. What happened today is evidence that the president and his administration and the powers that be believe that they can push us around and bully us in a way that we either take or we say, you know what, not on my watch. Enough's enough.
Yeah, and I'll say it again, and a lot of people would call this misinformation. So I want to throw a caveat here. I'm not stating a fact here. I'm stating I think. This is like my opinion. This is just like a hypothesis of mine. So this is not misinformation. just have
it's
to
an
say
opinion.
That. Yeah. From my interactions with people, from looking at the interactions between the people and the school boards, from looking at the interactions on Facebook, from looking at the interactions at local protests, it sure doesn't seem like the momentum is on the side of the left right now. It sure doesn't seem like, I mean, when somebody posts on Facebook right now that's like pro-vaccine, you get thousands of people commenting that are anti-mandate or anti-vaccine. And then the like 1 in 10 people that is there to basically like be pro-vaccine or pro-mandate or whatever, it's like 1 in 10 people, and they don't have a whole lot of support. So from my perspective, I'm kind of like, whoa, like this grassroots movement, like there's more power behind it. And then you see President Biden go on TV and say something like there's only 80 million unvaccinated Americans, which would insinuate that something like 270 million Americans have received the vaccine, which I don't even know if that's possible, because I don't even know. I mean, wouldn't that mean that like every adult or something like that?
I don't know where they get their facts or their stats. You know?
Either way, I mean, it's just, he gets up there and then he just like, he spouts off a bunch of stuff. He says a bunch of really dumb things. He makes an appeal to racism or to like anti-racism and says that this is about equity. And then he has the audacity to say, God bless our troops, a week after 13 of them died in a suicide bombing directly related to his lack of leadership. And then he walks off without answering any questions. This is the leader of the free world.
Yep.
Like it's
insane. and making it very obvious that I have spoken.
Yeah.
I have spoken. The edict has been announced.
Right.
And so the king's edict has been announced, and now it's up to the plebs and the peasants to decide, are we going to tolerate? And of course, like Mike has already said and stated, we're not calling for violence, but we are calling people to examine if this is the America that you want. And we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. I certainly am not excited about what came about today, and I hope this is a situation where the rubber meets the road, right? Like when your government feels it can strong arm people and coerce and compel them through threats of prosperity being taken from them, that is not a sign of a healthy government. That's a sign of a fearful, afraid government. And we have to ask ourselves if we're willing to fall under that kind of leadership, or if it's time for us to take the power back. And guess what? The government works for us. It always has. That's the way it's been established. The president may say that he has the power to do something, but typically when someone tells you that on the front end of a decision, there's a very strong chance that maybe their legal credibility should be questioned. And hopefully that's what we see. We need some businesses of 100 plus to be willing to say, you know what? No, this is unconstitutional, and I will not follow your demands, and take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And hopefully some challenges are made there that fall on the side of reason.
Yeah, I just wonder, so I work from home. So I'm wondering, how is this going to be enforced for people who work from home? I mean, is this going to be like a Rutgers type of situation where that student was barred from
virtual classes
because he wasn't vaccinated?
I mean, dude, this is literally clown world. It's illogical. It makes absolutely no sense. And personally, as a guy who's always kind of been on the fence about the vaccination anyway, this stuff just pushes me further towards, no, I'm sorry, I'm a man of conviction. You're not gonna mandate what I put into my body. It's not gonna happen.
Especially when you read the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
And you learn about the mark of the beast. Now, I'm not here to be any sort of conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but I mean, if you are a believer and you have read the book of Revelation and you believe it to be fact, we should be incredibly weary of a world government trying to force us to do something against our will in order to live, in order to engage in commerce, in order to travel. I mean, again, really not trying to be a fearmonger here.
Right.
But think about it.
Yep.
Just at least think about it.
Yes.
Right. And oh man, I mean, so many rabbit holes I could go down right now. And I really don't think that now is the right time to do it.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, this wasn't actually even scripted or on our list of what
it just happened today.
Yeah. So, and it's a big enough issue where we can't just dismiss it. It's worth talking about. So,
you know what else is worth talking about?
What's that?
Our bowling league.
Oh my gosh, what a transition, Mike. That is on our page, as a matter of fact.
Oh, yeah.
So why don't you, I mean, First of all, welcome Pilgrims to the podcast. We're glad to have you here. But tell us a bit, Mike, about the bowling league.
Well, I got roped in to to join a bowling league with you, Jason.
Yeah.
And a few of your buddies, and I love bowling. I've never been like good enough to like go get my own ball and have my own shoes. I use like a house ball, and I only bowl with like 2 fingers. But I mean, I'm usually around like 150. You know, in a good day, I can
That's
get
not bad.
You know,
That's a decent score.
yeah. So yesterday was our first day of bowling, and Jason, I just have to say, I beat you 2 out of 3 games, but your third game was marvelous.
So that's kind of like the build up for the put down. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I received that compliment, and I would just have you know that I was definitely below average. I got to figure out those lanes. There were a lot more oil on those lanes than what I've personally been used to.
It was the lanes.
Well, I'm not blaming the lanes by themselves, but as a matter of fact, since we're on the subject, we actually do have a small clip from our coach that I'd like to play here. So let's get to that. Hey, Coach Drummer, this is Jason here, just checking in. I know you guys started your bowling league last night. Just checking in to see how that went.
Yeah, it went pretty well. We got a promising team. I'm excited. We got some veterans, and we got a rookie too. I think you're familiar with who that might be.
Yeah, that's Mike Rogers.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, since you brought him up, what would you say? What would you say about him? I mean, what areas does he need to work on? You know, what's going on? What's the reality?
You know, it's always interesting getting a rookie on the team because you're not really sure what's the nerves and what's truly his skill set. After watching a few throws, it became quite apparent. Nerves had nothing to do with it. He's got some things he needs to work on for sure. We're going to work it out. But it's pretty apparent he's going to have to get some recoaching here, and you know what, I'm willing to step up and do that for him. But it's a long season, and I'm just going to make it my point to take him under my wing here and really show him the ropes, and hopefully he can turn it around. Because last night's performance, let's just hope it's not a sign of things to come for the whole season. But you know what? He throws a good ball. He throws it hard. He throws it fast. It's a round ball, so he's got that going for him. He'll come along. He'll be fine. He's a rookie, and he's got a lot of learning to do in a hot shots league as the one we're playing in. So I have high hopes for him.
Well, that's good. Positive thinking sometimes works. Positive coaching. You've definitely surrounded them by guys like Doug and Webby, who, are exceptional bowlers, and yourself too. So, we won't speak about my averages last night. I will just keep that off the record, since this is really about Mike. And I just appreciate you giving him a chance, Coach. And I'm gonna encourage him not to let you down.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly going to help, having guys like yourself and Dougie and Webb on the team, veterans, guys who've been there, shown up, week after week and know what it's like to bowl 3 games. Mike's going to have to build his stamina up and really pay attention to the regiment of, warming up before the games and kind of his actions and whatnot between throws. And, there's a lot of learning that goes into it, but I have full confidence in him, and we're glad to have him on the team. So, and you know what, and you brought it up in regards to your performance last night. We're all, it's first week, and we're veterans. So, we have that built-in excuse that, it's kind of our preseason here. We're warming up to it, but Mike's got to understand he's a rookie here. He's got to start showing us something. So, I'm looking forward to him stepping up his game, but you don't worry about your game, Jason. You're going to be just fine.
All right, Coach. Well, we appreciate your time, and we know you're a busy man, so we're going to let you go. But more than anything, we just appreciate the pep talk, and certainly, hopefully, it lights a fire under Mike.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what next Wednesday shows.
Cool, Coach. Take it easy. Thanks for the time.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
Have
bye.
a great day.
That's encouraging. I mean, is it not?
Well, there are a couple balls I threw there that probably weren't, super perfect, but, like he said, I throw a round ball, good ball. Definitely goes down the lane, knock over a few pins. So, I probably got to, rein it in. So good word from the coach,
Good word, yeah. Well, welcome to we're the Pugnacious Pythons, right? I mean, that's
the
the name we went.
argumentative biceps.
Yeah, argumentative biceps. That's our moniker or whatever. So, if you guys want to come check us out, you can. Wednesday nights, Hot Shots.
We even have a strike celebration.
We do, yeah.
We
you
do.
Guys, you were pretty pivotal.
I got a few of them.
You did. You got
a few
several.
strikes.
Several.
At least 3.
Yeah.
In 3 games.
you almost had a turkey a couple times last night.
Yeah.
I got one turkey. Not something I'm proud about.
Oh, you did?
I did, yeah.
I didn't even notice.
Game. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, you were probably too busy mocking me for my 115, 112 scores.
Yeah,
but
that's likely true.
But that's okay. You know what? I set the bar low so that you think highly of yourself, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, we're gonna have some friendly competition for 30 weeks now. So.
Oh, good. Oh,
yeah.
I think there was a frame where you got hung.
Oh,
if
yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Probably not just one frame. So
where we all got strikes, except for
me,
except for you. You got a 9 and spared it. So at least you
did
closed the
I spare?
frame.
Oh,
you
man.
did, yeah.
I didn't spare many. I'll tell you that.
So this is gonna be a real. What's that bowling movie?
Big Lebowski, or
it's gonna be just like that movie, just like it to the T. This bowling league is gonna be like that. Nobody's gonna die though.
Yeah, no one's gonna die. Hopefully, yeah. I mean, we don't have control of that, and we are in the middle of a global pandemic. But it's
true.
It's likely we have a 98% chance of not dying. So
yeah, yep, true.
Well, we're gonna move on really to our first topic of the night, the first legit one. We actually have titled today's show "In Science We Trust," because it seems like science is kind of the new theology that people are clinging to. And so we just kind of want to tackle some of the things going on in the world around us that have put a pretty significant influence on science itself. And so we're going to get to a Fauci clip here, responding to something that Governor DeSantis said that CNN was quick to call out as being inaccurate and completely wrong. And then we'll get Fauci's words, and then we'll kind of talk about that if you don't mind. Maybe. We'll try it here. Can you sing us a song while we...
I just died in your arms tonight. It must have been something you said.
All right, I can't take that.
The trouble is, as you know, politics still trump the science, right? You listen, for instance, to the governor of Florida, one of the states, of course, that has banned mask mandates. The way he described vaccinations was really remarkable, and again, defies the science. I want to play it now, just describing who the vaccine is for. Have a listen. I want to get your reaction.
The vaccines have helped people ward off severe illness, and we obviously work very hard to distribute it. At the end of the day, though, it's about your health and whether you want that protection or not. It really doesn't impact me or anyone else.
That's false. Please explain to folks listening right now why that's false.
Well, I mean, I didn't hear him very well from the sound, but I mean, if he feels that vaccines are not important for people, that they're just important for some people, that's completely incorrect. Vaccination, Jim, has been the solution to every major public health issue in which a vaccine was developed for. I mean, smallpox, polio, measles. Yeah. I'm not sure what people are talking about when they push back on vaccinations. It is historically, over decades and decades and decades, shown to be the way you control an infectious disease.
Beyond that, I mean, to clarify, his point at the end there was to say it's just a personal choice about yourself. It doesn't impact anybody else. Explain why that's just not true.
Yeah. Well, that's not true at all. I mean, obviously, it's important for you as an individual for your own personal protection, safety, and health. But when you have a virus that's circulating in the community and you are not vaccinated, you are part of the problem because you're allowing yourself to be a vehicle for the virus to be spreading to someone else. So it isn't as if it stops with you. If that were the case, then it would be only about you. But it doesn't. You can get infected even if you get no symptoms or minimally symptomatic, and then pass it on to someone who in fact might be very vulnerable, an elderly person, a person with an underlying disease. So when you're dealing with an outbreak of an infectious disease, it isn't only about you. There's a societal responsibility that we all have.
Societal responsibility.
But if they're vaccinated, they can't get it, or they still can get it?
They can get it.
Oh.
And probably would be less symptomatic than an unvaccinated person. So
but if they're vaccinated, they can't pass it to other people, right?
Well, actually, they can also pass it to other people and would maybe even likely not even know they had it. So they probably would even be maybe more prone to passing it on to somebody else.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Isn't that the weird part of I mean, the thing that made me laugh first was, obviously the question was weighted out of the gate. And so he was like, that's just totally wrong. Isn't it, Dr. Fauci?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely wrong. I didn't really hear what he said,
Yeah,
but
well,
all
the way
I know
he said
is
it is
that
like,
it's wrong.
Why don't you tell us how it's wrong? And he goes, well, it's absolutely wrong. I'm like, oh.
And I'm not sure what he said, but whatever he said was definitely wrong.
Yeah. So we're laughing because if we weren't laughing, we'd probably be crying. I mean, like, and I know that sounds dramatic, but we already know Dr. Fauci, if you can even stomach calling him a doctor anymore, we know he's been involved with COVID since before it even became a pandemic.
Even some funding maybe that went on to the Wuhan. Yeah.
And I personally think that it's even darker than that.
Yeah.
I think that he is personally responsible for our improper reaction from the very beginning that may or may not have directly led to a lot of people dying at his direction. Not something I think we should get into right now. It's just my personal bent. But Man, this is another case of people taking an argument that is filled with nuance, making it incredibly elementary, and then acting like you're the stupid one. It's like they're rejecting all the nuance, but then they're acting like you're stupid for not understanding how simple it is, when really it's a lot less simple than what they're trying to say.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into that a little bit further as the show unpacks. But, the one thing that I just think is hilarious is like DeSantis and Fauci now have this back and forth through the media that is pretty funny. Actually, of all the governors in the United States that have had to deal with COVID, really like boots on the ground, and of course, he's not in the hospital treating patients, but he is trying to lead his state through a couple of the biggest spikes that we've seen, right? And the data has shown that even though there have been multiple many people who have died in the state of Florida, what we have seen is that his leadership in both of the spikes that have kind of crept up in Florida has been instrumental in protecting the people of Florida, even while simultaneously he's trying his best to keep the state as open and free as possible. And so I think to some degree it's political when you attack a guy like DeSantis because his leadership is saving lives. Unlike what we maybe saw in New York City, where it's like put them in the nursing home and we'll see what happens. The beds are available, throw them there so they don't affect other people. And then guess what? We have massive amounts of people that are dead. The body count is astronomical. Florida has been on the cutting edge of multiple therapies that they allowed even to allow people in their state to try some of these, the antibody vaccine or the antibody treatments, early on in COVID sickness have proven now. I mean, when it was first being done, it was witch doctory or whatever we were being told, but now that's like one of the best ways to treat people if they catch it early enough in kind of the disease and how it's impacting the person. So I want to go to a clip. This is Governor DeSantis kind of responding to Dr. Fauci and trying to clarify statements that may have been misrepresented by CNN. Probably not intentionally, but he just wanted to make sure that things were clear.
If you're going to force vaccine mandates on people, just understand that what the data is showing us about the vaccine. The data is showing us you're much less likely to be hospitalized or die if you're vaccinated. That is true, and I think you see it in the statistics. However, the vaccinations have not created herd immunity. And so if the idea is that having herd immunity, you force everyone to do this and that will create herd immunity, that has not happened. It's still spreading. People who, I mean, obviously in Florida we're going down now, which is great, but that's not what the issue is it creating the herd immunity? Fauci also said if 50% were vaccinated, you would not see any surges anymore. Well, that isn't true. Look at, I mean, obviously the Sun Belt, look at the Pacific Northwest, look at Hawaii, huge surges that you've seen. And so, but just understand what you're doing. If you're forcing somebody to show proof of this, to eat at a restaurant or to do basic tasks, go to the grocery store. There's some places around, if you look at some of these places that have really gone off the deep end to say, to go to the grocery store, you should have to do that. So we're not doing that in Florida. But the theory behind it is that if you make everyone have to do this under penalty of law, that somehow you wouldn't have spread. And I think we just have to be honest about what it's doing and what it's not doing. We had hoped that if you had 50%, then you wouldn't have that. We had hoped you could build herd immunity that way, but that just hasn't happened. It's not happening in Israel. It didn't happen in the UK. It's not happening in the United States. It doesn't mean that there's not positive impacts, but the positive impacts is mostly reducing the vaccinated individual's chance of being severely ill.
Is he wrong?
I don't think so. At least from the information that I've consumed. Right, that's what it seems to be. Is the vaccine serves as a way to make sure that if you do get COVID, that it's not as severe as what it would have been previously. We know it's not going to prevent you from getting sick.
Is it going to prevent you from getting someone else sick, kind of like Dr. Fauci tried to tell us?
No, it's not going to.
Huh.
Right. So that's why people are looking at that, and then they're looking at the fact that COVID seems to really only get severe in people with underlying health conditions, and they're going, well, like me, I'm 29, I'm totally healthy, I live an active lifestyle, I have a healthy diet at Taco Bell, and when I get sick, I get sick for like a day and I'm done. Like, I've never been hospitalized for a sickness, like, glory to God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm looking at this and I'm like, hey, like the risk of potentially causing health complications with a shot that now people are almost like, I mean, they're not forcing
in
it
your
at
arm,
the barrel of a
yet,
gun or
yeah.
anything, but man, they really, really want me to get it.
Yeah.
And the more they want me to get it, the more I don't want to, because I'm like, you guys don't know what's best for me. You really don't.
You don't
Let
care
me
about
make
me.
that decision.
Yeah.
You know, this is my body. This
Yeah.
is like a temple given to me by my God.
Yeah.
You know, I serve him, not you. And that's another thing that I've learned really gets under these people's skin, is when you tell them you don't fear death because you fear God, they think that you are a lunatic.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, Governor DeSantis kind of nailed it, right? And I felt like he was trying to be pretty rational, reasonable. Again, another reason why they probably fear him and are trying to undermine every single thing that he says and does, because he's coming at this from a rational standpoint. Florida is one of the most vaccinated states in the country.
Right.
The data has shown that. He is vaccinated. He is pro-vaccine. He is has set up multiple connections with CVS and other drugstores, grocery store chains to get the vaccine into the bodies of the people who desire to have it, right? He is not anti-vax. The pictures being painted by CNN and many others that he is somehow an anti-vax guy, and he's not. He is pro-vaccination, but he is also pro-freedom and pro-choice. He wants it to be the choice of the individual to determine if it's something that they want. And all he's trying to say is it should be a choice. And that choice should not determine if someone can live freely in the United States or not. Because if your freedom is based on you getting something that the government tells you you have to, guess what that does to your freedom? It negates it. You are no longer free if the only way you can be free is if you do what the government demands of you. That is the opposite of freedom. And so he is pro-freedom. He is pro-vaccination. He is working diligently as the leader of Florida and maybe even potentially the leader of the free world someday to try and ensure that he keeps his people safe and prevents as much death as physically possible from a global pandemic that is indiscriminate in who it infects and who it kills.
I just have to say really quick, your little blurb about freedom there. So that was another quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it, from Joe Biden during his press conference today, is he literally said, "This is not about your freedom." Okay, I shouldn't say he literally said it because it's a paraphrase, but
Sure.
he said, like, "This is not about your freedom. This is about public safety." So he said the quiet part out loud. And
Yeah.
he said it boldly.
Yeah.
He is unapologetically rolling back our freedom in order to force us to do something.
Right.
And he's basically saying, "Hey, man, I'm the president. What you gonna do?"
I have the power to do this.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? I'm the president.
Come on, man.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why people like me. I mean, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. At least not for the reasons that most people would think. What I fear is that this is gonna get messy.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I fear, is that it's gonna get messy. Like this, man. I mean, there are a lot of hills I wouldn't die on, but I mean, this might be a hill that, you know,
Yeah,
like
I mean,
if my occupation is taken away from me, my house is taken away from me. I mean, eventually, like, what am I gonna do? Just sit and take it? I know I'm not gonna.
well, and we've seen how people react when they feel as if an election, was fraudulent. And we're not here to say we have any evidence of anything that isn't already out there. But what I can say with assurance is that steps were made leading up to 2020 to ensure that it would not be a normal election, to ensure that mass vote by mail litigation was challenged in state Supreme Courts and state constitutions to ensure a pathway to victory for Joe Biden. Does that mean that in the back alley that all these hidden ballots were being no, that's not what I'm saying personally. If that somehow came to the light, would I be surprised? Absolutely not. With the amount of power that's on the line and the way that the Democrats are already using that power, and I shouldn't say Democrats, I'm talking progressive leftist Democrats are using that power. I would not be surprised to any length that they would go to get power, keep power, and then abuse that power that is given to them. So it's a crazy time. And the way that we've seen Americans already handle things like this, people getting pushed to the brink where literally their jobs are taken from them because they're refusing to put a vaccine in their body. This, to your point, Mike, in a volatile world that is already burning like the biggest dumpster fire that I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Right.
I'm scared.
Yeah. And okay, so you're going to have to sit with me for a second because this is actually going to transition us into our next bit.
Yeah.
But so right now we're seeing nurses and healthcare workers, and I guess now everybody that works for a company with more than 100 employees that doesn't want to get the vaccine is, we're all kind of ready to like risk our livelihood in order to just not get a vaccine. And conversely, you see other people, like in the state of Texas, after this abortion bill has been passed, people are now complaining that they're now criminals for trying to do their job, right? So we have a dichotomy right now, and there are two sides. And the problem is, if you're a subjective moralist, you're going to look at all this and go, why is everybody getting so crazy about this? And you're going to choose sides however you want to choose sides. But if you believe in objective morality, and you believe that what God says is good, and you believe that what God says is evil, you are clearly going to end up on one side or the other. And Texas was a huge victory. What happened today was a huge loss. So all that to say, we're looking at what's happening in the abortion debate, which I think is so relevant because like you have all these, I don't want to say anti-vaxxers, but anti-mandators, anti-vaxxers, they're all saying my body, my choice. And they're getting laughed at by these people who are trying to say my body, my choice applies to a woman, like without acknowledging the body that's growing inside of her. And that's causing all kinds of, all kinds of debates and all kinds of just like people laughing at each other and not taking each other seriously. So,
well, that's a good point. And even the fact, so one of the things that has sprung up from, we talked a little bit about the Texas abortion, legislation that the Supreme Court refused to bring up. And that doesn't mean that it's a dead issue, right? What they said is that basically they didn't have merit to bring the case forward. But what it essentially did was say after 6 weeks of pregnancy, abortions can no longer be performed. And so from conception to 6 weeks, abortion is still legal in the state of Texas. The big thing now is obviously people want zero limits on abortion. They want to be able to kill the baby whenever they determine it's right, all the way up to birth or even partial birth abortion, and still be able to make that decision to end the life of another human being. The issue is that many on the pro-abortion side are trying to bring up at this point. There's two things. The first one is, a woman won't even really know that she's pregnant typically until the time that she has already missed a period, which can be, anywhere between, 3 to 4 weeks, right? Or even longer, right? Depending on irregularities in menstruation, right? And we got a couple of dudes talking about menstruation. But I will note that it is menstruation. So, but anyway.
Well, as if you can't be educated on something without firsthand experiencing
I grew up with
such a dumb argument.
grew up with a mom, 2 sisters. I now have a wife and 2 daughters, but I have no ability to speak on menstruation. That according to some.
Yeah, who were the scientists that wrote the book on female reproduction, or like?
Right. I mean, who was the doctor that created birth control? Right.
Oh,
another man. Right. But this is a woman's issue. It's almost as if Texas is trying to end abortions.
Almost. It's almost as if Texas is trying to end abortions.
And of course, that in any form is not going to be tolerated by the leftists.
Right. Because they just want to kill their babies.
They want to have the right to kill their babies no matter what.
Yeah,
no matter what. And because my body, my choice, right, to your point. And the other issue really is that on the subject of abortion, whether it's Governor Abbott or any other man, this is a woman's issue. It is not an issue that any man should have any right to weigh in on at all, because it's not, you've never been pregnant, you don't understand what it means to be pregnant, and you never will be pregnant, so therefore shut up and stay out of the conversation, get back in line. So we actually had Nick Nichols, of all people, down in Texas this week, and he actually did a pretty good job. So we're going to get to a clip that we put together from the Wokeville Gazette, and we'll circle back. For almost everyone, the issue of abortion is a contentious and highly controversial topic. It is also very personal. However, for America's raging leftists, it is also something else, namely, a woman's issue. In the clown world which the progressive left has created, we have come to understand that terms like male and female are highly repressive constructs which have been placed upon people and cultures, typically because of ignorance, intolerance, fear, control, or religious oppression.
Proper use of gender identity terms, including pronouns, is a crucial way to signal courtesy and acceptance. It's a compassionate way of respecting individuals and referring to them in a way that's consistent and true to who they are.
From the House floor of Congress, we've seen America's representatives make concerted efforts to change language. Words like mother are being banned on the House floor and replaced with birthing person. Breastfeeding, a term which has had significance for a millennia, is now being replaced with chest feeding in order to set America free from the repressive and offensive cultural prisons they have been tied to for generations. However, when it comes to certain topics, the battle cry of these same progressive puppets seems to drastically change.
As a woman, I feel very strongly that abortion is a women's issue. Sorry about that. And men really need to stay out of it.
This week, when pressed by a journalist from the fake news network Fox News, Jen Psaki helped solidify this hypocritical stance.
It's a woman's body, and it's her choice. I know you've never faced those choices, nor have you ever been pregnant. The president believes a woman's choices should be respected.
In the confusing clown world which has been created by progressives, it can be difficult to understand where traditional gender roles fit in and where they are no longer allowed. However, one thing that is becoming increasingly clear is that when it comes to the issue of abortion, it is still a woman's issue, and men need to butt out. Reporting for the Wokeville Gazette, this is Nick Nichols, Pugnacious Pilgrim, News.
Nick Nichols really knows how to knock him dead.
He does, man.
He really brings it home.
I mean, and that probably was a tough thing to put together, him being a man,
Right.
to even be involved in reporting on such a thing as abortion, just stay out of it. Stay out of it.
Yeah. I mean, think about all the things that men feel like they can have a valid opinion on that they really can't.
Right.
I mean, like lipstick, like makeup, like bathing suits. I mean, come on.
Cooking, doing dishes.
Oh, yeah. Making sandwiches?
Yeah, definitely. It is, I mean, tongue in cheek, right? But the fact that it's like, dude, pick a side, it's kind of like the whole my body, my choice thing, right? And I understand that thing's been flipped on its head many times, but, basically our lawmakers are saying we have to use the terminology birthing person because it's insensitive to men if we don't include them in the ability to have babies. But then when it comes to abortion, they have no right to speak of it because men can never get pregnant and they wouldn't understand.
Yeah. Okay, you want to know why we have a plague of single mothers right now? Is because we've made abortion a women's issue.
Right.
We've made childbirth a women's issue. If a woman gets pregnant, it's a woman's issue.
Yeah.
So you're telling all of these irresponsible, and I'm saying irresponsible because if you're having a kid out of wedlock, okay, and I might be, I might be getting on people's nerves here, but you clearly didn't plan that, okay? And I'm not going to say that that's like 100%, it's kind of irresponsible, okay? And
it's unbiblical as well, right?
Yeah, you can attack me for that,
right.
Whatever. Yeah. Go ahead and attack me for that. But then you're going to go ahead and call it a women's issue, so these irresponsible men are going to walk away because now they have an excuse to not take responsibility for this. This is not purely a women's issue. It takes a man and a woman. As much as liberals or leftists or whatever would try to change the definition of what it takes to create a baby,
at the end of the day,
you need an XY and an XX. Genetic male and a genetic female to do the deed and make a baby. It takes both. Both are equally responsible for what goes on.
Right. And for those that are listening and may have children in the room and you need Mike to explain what the deed actually is, he'd be happy to sit down with your kids and explain that to them.
Yeah, they call 1-800-BABY-STORK and they place an order from the catalog.
But your point is so valid, Mike, right? when you make something just a woman's issue, it's easy for a man to walk away. It's not my problem. It's somebody else's problem, right? And it's bad enough that we live in a culture of promiscuity, right? Where pregnancy means nothing and abortion has been leveraged for decades now as a form of birth control. Like, that is not birth control. It is not a contraceptive, right? Conception has already taken place. We are now talking about a separate individual with separate DNA that is going to grow up to have separate fingerprints, a separate brain, separate conscience, separate cognitive reasoning, and yet we refuse to acknowledge the fact that it is an individual when it is inside of a woman's body. And it didn't just get there. It's not like a woman woke up one day and found herself pregnant, unless her name was Mother Mary.
Right.
But the point is, like, immaculate conception is not the leading cause of pregnancy in the world in which we live, right? The
Right.
leading cause of pregnancy in the world in which we live is people choosing to have a sexual relationship and refusing to deal with the consequences when it comes to to the point of abortion, right?
Right. And the number one argument against that, right, is like, well, what if a woman was raped? What if there was incest? What if blah, blah, blah? And they come up with all of these hypothetical scenarios that we know are incredibly statistically low. I'll say it again, incredibly
Yes.
statistically low. And even then, and I'm radical when it comes to this, because like, I've had conversations with family members that are like, what if a 14-year-old girl got raped and then got pregnant? Do you think that she should have to carry that baby to term? And I'm like, yeah, not as a punishment, but that child is a miracle. Like, why would we punish the child by killing it because the child's father did something bad?
Well, and not only that, right? But what are you trying to do? Is it to save the girl, the complexity and the hardship of carrying a baby to term? Like, what about the complexity and hardship about leading that child, the 14-year-old child, to a place where they actually kill another child and then have to live with that guilt for the rest of their lives, right?
And there's nuance to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a black and white issue. Never has been, right?
Yeah. Personally, and I know a lot of Christians believe this, we believe that life is a miracle. Like, conception is a miracle, and conception is the beginning of a human life, a distinctly human life. That is the science, right? And I'll get into those arguments with people, and then people like start yelling at me. They're like, so you just think that women should be able to get raped and there should be no consequences? And it's like, no, I'm not saying that.
Is the what should the valid consequence of rape should be killing a baby, like child sacrifice? No, the valid consequence of rape should be that the man who, if it is a man raping the woman, should have to go to prison. Like, that should be the valid.
Or worse.
Yeah, or worse.
Man, yeah.
Right.
So, I don't know. I get into a lot of debates with people. Go figure, right? That I would get into a debate with someone. But again, like, cases like this are incredibly statistically low. And even in those cases, I mean, there have been several people that have, like, even spoken to Congress, and they were the product of, like, a rape.
Yeah.
And they're basically saying, like, I'm sure glad my mom carried me to term. Like, I might not even be here right now.
And it, again, we're not the subject matter experts on this, but we can weigh in, right? And we're smart enough to understand.
Yeah, I want to say that too. Just because I said it earlier, and I'll say it again. Just because you haven't experienced something firsthand doesn't mean that you can't have a valid opinion on it.
Right.
Okay. None of us have actually been to space, but everybody's convinced that
the moon exists.
That the moon exists, that the stars exist, that the earth isn't flat, allegedly. And and that's all I'm trying to say.
Right.
Is like we all have the ability to consume information from the experts and draw an educated conclusion. And any attempts to silence somebody because they haven't been there or they haven't done that, that's just manipulation.
It is. It is. That's exactly what it is.
And it's lazy.
And the reason that it's manipulation, Mike, is that those same people that are using those arguments are also the ones telling you, how dare you say a man cannot get pregnant. It's the same people.
Yeah, they're the same ones that are trying to chest feed their children
Right.
as biological males.
Right.
Oh,
So
man.
you can't have it both ways. And folks would say the same. Well, how about all these pro-life advocates that are now, anti-vaxxers saying my body, my choice? It is not an apples to apples comparison.
No.
What we are talking about in one situation is a person legitimately saying my choice to not vaccinate my body is not going to impact anyone else inside of my body. It will be my body and my choice. What a woman is saying when she's pregnant, my body, my choice, it is actually not just her body. It is her choice for sure, because the baby doesn't have a voice. The only voice that a child inside of a mother's womb has are those that are willing to advocate for its life, even when the mother is potentially attempting to remove that baby from her body. The baby will not survive if the woman makes a choice to abort. It is not just her body. It is two bodies. And it is not just her choice to decide if that baby lives or dies. And so there is a significant difference between the two scenarios. And so don't fall for the manipulative tactic that tries to compare the two as if they're the same. Now, I will say this. I got into a discussion on this with a friend of mine on social media, and another friend of hers weighed in and said, but men and women aren't exactly equal in the equation, are they, Jason? And that's true. They're not. When a woman gets pregnant, she's left to deal oftentimes, sadly, in the broken world in which we live, she is oftentimes left to deal with the result of that conception on her own. Is that fair? Is that good? Is that right? Is that the way it ought to be? Absolutely not. That is not God's design. That is not what he desires for this world. That's not what he created and gave to Adam and Eve. But that is the result of a broken and fallen world. And we have an opportunity to either perpetuate even more sin and multiply upon itself with things like abortion, or we have the ability to truly take a stand and say, no, we're going to be a moral people. And even though an immoral act took place, but a lot of times with, whether it's rape, whether it's incest, whether it's premarital sex, and that led to conception, all those things are immoral acts. But you don't have to do another immoral act in order to somehow negate the consequences of the first immoral activity.
Right. Especially since God is doing a good thing by, conception. God is doing a good thing by bringing a child into this world.
Yeah. I mean,
you know what I mean? An act as horrible as rape. Conception is a miracle, and we should be rejoicing in the fact that a life was made.
Right. We don't have to rejoice in all the circumstances that led up to it, but the consequence is not the child. The child is always a blessing. The consequence is the fallout of making a choice and then having to figure out how am I going to make this work?
Right.
And there are countless resources available. Crisis pregnancy centers, churches, orphanages, people waiting to adopt. There are countless opportunities for single pregnant mothers who can't take on the responsibility of carrying their babies, beyond birth and having that responsibility. There are options. And guess who are the biggest advocates for you not to know what those options are? Planned Parenthood, and those that desire, for whatever sick, twisted reason, to make abortion the only available option to you. That is immoral.
Yeah. And I have some experience along those lines as well. And they claim to be an organization that gives you all the options. They don't. They really don't. I mean, they really prep you for one thing. They're the type of organization that'll say hey, we'll give you these prenatal vitamins, but what date do you want to come back in?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, and that's kind of like the backhanded way that they do stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, it only makes sense if your business model is abortion primarily, which it is. Why would you not be primarily advocating for what is best for business, and B, what's going to keep that business around for the long haul.
Right.
It's bad for business to try and push people elsewhere. And you know what? Planned Parenthood is a business.
Well, and that's the problem with medicine in general, big medicine, right? And that's the problem with vaccines, and that's the problem with all of healthcare, is that it's so wrapped up in profit. And I'm not advocating for socialized healthcare by any means, because I think the government would not change that at all and would make it even worse. But it's so wrapped up in profit and like the lobbying and like, I mean, you look at a company like Pfizer and just, oh man, they make money like hand over fist.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And why are we only pushing treatments from these like super ultra rich mega
Right.
healthcare companies?
And they're also responsible for the biggest legal payout in the history of America.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I see right through it at this point. And that's why I'm not even like a fan of going to the doctor anymore. I feel like I go to the doctor and I say I got a runny nose, and they've got like 3 different treatments that are all saying like, hey, if you could get us some prescriptions, like, you know, we'll give you a little something on the side. So I don't even know if they're going to be treating me based on what I need, or if they're, I mean, I was in a sales position one time, or
you know how that
not
works.
one time, but yeah, I know how it works. All of the vendors are coming at you and saying like, hey, our incentives are better than that guy's.
Yep.
And eventually you're pitching solutions to people
Based on your favors that you owe somebody else.
exactly based on what you want to receive, not based on what would actually be best for them.
Right.
And that goes on in the healthcare industry and every other industry where sales is like a tactic that needs to be used.
So when the Bible says money is the root of all kinds of evil, those are the kind of things that it's talking about, right?
Right.
Is that really money talks for a lot of people. And when money becomes the bottom line, becomes the bottom line, you know, it's a dangerous place to be. We're going to take a short break here. And when we come back, we're going to come back with some more thoughts on the vaccine. So don't go anywhere. If you're convinced that vaccination mandates from a government with a sketchy and unethical past are morally good, but believe biblical mandates from a holy and perfect triune God are morally wrong, it may be time to get off social media and tune in to the Pugnacious Pilgrim podcast. Hello, Pilgrims. This is Jason from the Pugnacious Pilgrim, reminding you that there's a lot of misinformation out there. So, if you're looking for truth that doesn't change based on the winds of culture, we invite you to join us every week for the Pugnacious Pilgrim podcast, where we take a look at the world from a Christian's point of view. We won't pretend to have all the answers, but we do promise to do our best at discerning truth from error and having some fun along the way. So, if you're looking for something different than you've already found so far, we encourage you to give us a try. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor and tell your friends. For more information about the Pugnacious Pilgrim, check out our website at www.pugnaciousPilgrim.com. Thanks again, Pilgrims, and stay pugnacious. Welcome back, Pilgrims, to the show. We're thankful to have you back. A little bit about ourselves. Don't forget to tell your friends. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love to have you tell your friends. It's good to hear from you guys when we do. When we get that feedback, we certainly appreciate it. And we love seeing you guys around town, too. Those of you who we may bowl with now or whatever the case may be, you know, it's pretty cool to run into people who are listening to the show, Mike, and just giving us some encouraging feedback. And not only that, but they're literally saying like, dude, when's the next show coming? And I'll tell you what, a weekly show is a lot of work. I don't think we'd be able to really swing more than this, but we're so happy to have the listeners that we do, and we just encourage you to continue to give us that feedback. It is good for our hearts and our souls and our motivation, but also more than anything, we'd love if you'd share the podcast with your friends. That's the best way you can say thank you to Mike and I, is get the word out so that we can get the word out and the encouragement out to others as well. But we, there's this idea of being a vaccine truther now. I remember this concept now. I mean, this is maybe a made-up word that I came up with, but it was like, do you remember like the whole 9/11 truthers or the truthers, right?
Yeah.
And so now, really, we're walking into a scenario where there's vaccine truthers, and it's a culturally dangerous thing to be. Whether it's your job that's on the line or your reputation that's on the line, your tenure that's on the line, as vaccine mandates become the way of American culture or whatever, it makes me think about, what these people are risking to really speak from a professional point of view, from their own personal experience, education, training, knowledge, insight, and still be labeled whack job, crazy, whatevers, So we have a clip that we want to get to quick, and then we'll dissect that and speak on it a little bit. So without further hesitation, here goes.
Hello, my name is Dr. Christina Parks. I received my PhD in cellular and molecular biology right here in the state of Michigan from University of Michigan Medical School. And so I'm very well versed in the science of both these mRNA gene therapy, vaccines, this kind of technology, as well as what a vaccine is designed to do in the body, what it can do, what it can't do, and the fact that this is extremely complex science that has been oversimplified in the media to basically take away our freedom of choice. What I want to address today in this limited time is the fact that vaccine requirements and mandates are based on the faulty assumption that the vaccines in question prevent transmission of the pathogen, right? Does the vaccine for DTaP prevent transmission? No. Does the vaccine for flu prevent transmission? No. Do the vaccines for COVID prevent transmission? No. In fact, they were never designed to do that. All right, so you're asking, what about this 95% effectiveness? If you look at those clinical trials, they do not say that they prevent transmission. They expressly say that they're measuring whether they attenuate symptoms. So they're 95% effective based on their clinical trials at attenuating symptoms for the first variant, which is essentially gone in our population. Right now, the predominant variant is the Delta, and CDC Director Walensky basically said that these vaccines have no ability to prevent infection by and transmission of the Delta variant. Our policy needs not to be built on the hope of what we think something we want it to do, but what the data actually tell us. So do these viruses do the vaccines prevent the virus from infecting and replicating in the nose and nasopharynx? No. They've only been shown to prevent that replication in the lungs. They're different. The mucosa is very different than the lungs. It's very different than the blood. You inject it to the blood, you make antibodies in your blood. The virus isn't infecting your blood. It's infecting your mucosa, and you don't produce any IgA to neutralize it. In fact, recent studies have shown that the vaccinated, especially with the Delta variant, and the unvaccinated have similar amounts of virus in their nose and throat. In Barnstable, Massachusetts, the CDC tracked an outbreak of 469 cases of COVID. 74% occurred in fully vaccinated, and 4 out of 5 of those hospitalized were vaccinated. All right, so maybe they are mandating this because they just didn't know with the COVID. And so my main complaint is with our health agencies and the CDC, who basically know better and are misleading the public. So let's look at DTaP, which the scientists and the CDC have known since 2014 that the acellular pertussis vaccine does not prevent people from getting infected with the pertussis bacteria and passing it to others. In fact, it was never designed to do that. The vaccine was designed to neutralize the pertussis toxin. Pertussis, we know it as whooping cough. It can be fatal for children under 6 months. So neutralizing this toxin saves lives, all right? I'm not going to debate that. But what it doesn't do is neutralize the bacteria. So what happens is fully vaccinated children go to daycare, they pick up that bacteria, and they come home and they give it to their newborn brother or sister. They get deathly ill, and they go to the hospital. Hopefully, our medical professionals are able to save them. But who do they blame? Now the CDC is blaming anti-vaxxers for the limitations of this vaccine design. I suggest that they be transparent and tell parents that although it is preventing severe disease in their children, it is not preventing transmission, because we have created a whole class of asymptomatic pertussis carriers who are increasing the disease.
I mean, that's a professional, right? And just in case you didn't catch her name, I thought it was important to, she's a molecular virus specialist or whatever, like a doctor, a physician, I mean, it's crazy that a woman like that would be dismissed. And maybe in the words of Joe Biden, I mean, she's also a black woman, so it should be even less likely that she would be dismissed, since everything's racist in this.
Right. His point would be that this pandemic is disproportionately affecting people of color. So if anybody is allowed to have an opinion, and in this case, it's not even opinion. Like,
right.
She's talking about things that are true.
Yeah, she's just stating fact, right?
Right. And that's the part that really gets under my skin, is people especially our president, are saying you have a moral responsibility to go get vaccinated because of everybody else, when we know that the vaccines don't even prevent you from spreading the virus. So how can you say that we have a moral responsibility to do that because it affects other people, but we could transmit the disease whether or not we get the vaccine?
Right.
So really it is my body. It's whether or not I care enough to get seriously ill or just a little bit ill.
Right. Yeah, and to that point, I think the obligation that we have to one another is to be to care, to do our best to prevent spreading the disease in whatever way possible that we determine is best. But, like we had a good friend that, he was like, I'm not feeling good. I'm not sure if I should, come to this thing. And we're like, well, make the decision, right? If you got to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you, whatever the case may be. Now, just to be kind, he went and got a COVID test and a strep test and all other kinds of tests that you could get to determine what it was and what it wasn't, and they were all negative, right? Yeah. That's one way that you can care. When my family went to Florida, we came back and we got tested right away before we saw anybody else. When my son and I went to Idaho, before we went to see my grandma, who's dying of heart failure, we got COVID tests to make sure we weren't bringing anything with us, right? We wore masks when we were on the airplane. We wore masks when we were with her, right? Like, those are little things that we could do as unvaccinated individuals to care for my grandma. The story is told that the only way we can care for one another is by getting vaccinated. And what I would tell you, and even the information that she shared, right? Like, vaccinated kids going to daycare can still get whooping cough, right? True. And then they bring it home and their infant child gets infected with it, and it's a deathly disease for people that young. But the reality is that you can still spread the disease even when you're vaccinated, because these vaccines do not prevent you from getting the disease. That they're not intended to. They're intended to, what did she say? Attenuating the symptoms to make them less severe. Like, that's the point of the vaccine. Mm-hmm. So when Dr. Fauci, who is smarter than me, right? When Dr. Fauci...
Arguable.
But I'm just saying, when Dr. Fauci, of all people, is saying, well, the polio vaccine and all these other vaccines, those vaccines legitimately prevented you from getting polio. Like, that was the point. You can't get polio when you've been vaccinated against it, right? In those kind of vaccines. These vaccines are immune boosters, which help our bodies adapt to more quickly and more rapidly infections when they come.
Right.
That's a big deal that people don't really understand is built into the vaccine. It's not like these, we should not be like surprised, like, what? People that got the COVID vaccine can still get COVID? Yeah. It's not designed to prevent you from getting COVID.
Right. But it's being marketed as if
it were.
Yeah.
That is misinformation.
That is the misinformation. 100%.
And so I got into a discussion because today on social media, I and this was before Biden came out, I don't, call me, I'm not a prophet, right? But I could see the way things were going, right? But I asked the question, when forced vaccinations fail to stop COVID, will there be any recourse for those who were required to choose between vaccine and putting food on their family's table? Hashtag asking for a friend. Not my question. I'm just asking for a friend. And a friend of mine came back and said one could opt for death or near death. And I came back and said,
only two options.
We all do every day, right? Every day we opt for death or near death just by living, right? By driving, by drinking water that could be contaminated, right? By walking under trees, but you can mitigate many risks in life, but there are no guarantees. And I said, P.S., sugar is poison. And so then he came back and said, one must weigh the risks versus the rewards. Your statement of vaccination stopping COVID was illogical. Stopping death related to COVID is more logical. Once again, that's not entirely true. What the doctor told us, what she said is that 49% of people who were infected were vaccinated. This was in Massachusetts in the study. And then she also said 4 out of 5 of the people that were hospitalized with COVID infections were vaccinated. It did not prevent 4 out of 5 people from going to the hospital with near-death experiences, right? There's no guarantees with the vaccine. And so I said, in response to him, I said, but that's not how these vaccines are being sold, is it? The evidence is now clear, but the vaccines are being sold as if they will end the pandemic, which they clearly will not. Like the flu, the efficacy rate of the viral vaccine is explicit to the variant of the virus it was created to fight, like she said. We're now in Delta. These vaccines weren't built for Delta. They weren't built for Mu or Nu or U or Lima or whatever else is coming down the pipeline, right? As vaccines increase, so does the volatility of the virus and its ability to mutate and transform for survival. There is clear science that has been studied, peer-reviewed, and published that shows the inefficacy if vaccines on mutations of the virus which it was not meant to fight. And she later said that, right, in her statement. And then I actually even shared the video with him for him to check out. Like, these aren't just my words. Here, take an expert's voice. So then he came back and said, I'll stop reasoning with you. You clearly have a skewed outlook and are doing everything in your power to justify why you won't get vaccinated. Perhaps if a Republican were in office and offered up the vaccine for frontline defense, then you'd sing a different tune. And I said back to him, it's funny how your commitment to reason only goes as far as politics. What have I said or shared that is inaccurate or unreasonable? I'm not advocating to not take the shot. I'm actually advocating for choice. I tapped on the like button on your comment above because I agreed with your statement that one must weigh the risks versus the rewards. However, the issue I'm seeing is that there seems to only be one acceptable rational, reasonable place to land after weighing those costs. Otherwise, you have a skewed outlook and are doing everything in your power to justify why you don't get vaccinated. That's the world in which we live.
Right.
Oh, sure, do the research, do the facts, do this. But if you don't land where we demand you land at the end of all that, then you're just a perpetuator of misinformation or you just want grandma to die.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that has come from some of my interactions on the old social media as well. Is I've been called things like ignorant, I've been called things like uneducated, stuff like that. And Pilgrims, I'm gonna level with you guys. Just because somebody came to a different conclusion than you doesn't mean that they are ignorant all the time. And it doesn't all the time mean that they're uneducated. It means that they have done, a lot of the times, okay, I'm not saying every time, but a lot of the times it means that they've done research and they've come to a different conclusion. That's it, right? This happens in the world of science all the time, where you have like two groups of scientists, they're both analyzing the same tests, the same data, and they come to two completely different conclusions. How do we figure out which one is correct? Well, usually, if the majority decides one thing, that's just what we go with. The problem is there is objective truth still.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, even further, if it was the minority that believed the objective truth, the majority is going to continue to bring them further and further and further and further away from that objective truth. And that's kind of what we're seeing here with this vaccine movement or whatever it is. You've got doctors risking their careers trying to speak out against the way that this thing is being sold. And then you have your average layperson who's just listening to what they hear in the media, looking at these medical doctors and going, oh, those guys are just victims of right-wing propaganda. Like, what? You really think that this person would commit career suicide over right-wing propaganda? You really think this many healthcare workers would be walking out on their jobs because they're falling victim to right-wing propaganda? And my message is, the reason we are where we are is because we refuse to be victimized.
Right.
Not because we are victims of any sort of propaganda. It's because we refuse to be the victim in this story. And we're going to stand up against that. And we're going to do what it takes to earn our freedom, to earn our own autonomy, to make whatever decisions we choose to make. There are tens of millions of Americans who have gotten so fed up with the way that this pandemic has been handled. And we've determined, I've weighed the risks. I want to go on living my life. All of you guys who want to be overly careful, why don't you take your own personal responsibility for your own health and safety? Go ahead and mask up. Go ahead and keep hand sanitizer on your hands all the time. Wear full-face respirators for all I care. But stop telling me what I need to do because you're walking around terrified of what could happen to you. That's not my responsibility. It's yours.
Right.
And we're all responsible for our own health decisions.
Right. And that doesn't mean that that's where our responsibility ends. I don't even disagree that we should care for our neighbor, right? Love your neighbor, right?
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah, I know you
Yes.
do. I'm saying it because I want people to hear us say it, right? Like, we ought to love our neighbor. The Bible tells us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, right? But that doesn't mean that there's only one way to love our neighbor, and that's what's being perpetuated here. If you don't vaccinate, you don't love your neighbor. And we want you to love your neighbor so much that we're going to force you to get vaccinated. Guess what? That's not loving your neighbor. If your neighbor doesn't have the ability or the capacity to not get vaccinated if they so choose, you are not loving your neighbor. You are forcing your neighbor to toe the line that you demand. That's what President Biden is doing here. He's strong-arming businesses by saying you're either strapped financially and even, I don't know what the other word is, right? But imagine just the administrative nightmare of trying to administer COVID tests once a week or whatever the requirement's going to be. It would be ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Or just mandate that your people get the shot. What do you think companies are going to do? What do you think they're going to do?
Man, my main point here, though, is getting the vaccine doesn't even prevent you from infecting your neighbor. So what
might
difference?
be more prone to infect your neighbor.
Yeah,
And
so
I mean,
in the words of Hillary Clinton, what difference at this point does it make?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make any difference. If you're going to tell me that I hate people and want them to die because I'm not getting vaccinated, but even if I got vaccinated, they could get COVID, and if they were unvaccinated, they could die. Even if they are vaccinated, they could still get hospitalized and die. It's a zero-sum game.
Right.
There's no point.
And that's kind of the point that I was trying to make a little bit too, is that, look, at the end of all this, what we're going to recognize, which is what we have already in the 18, 19, 24 months that we've already been dealing with this, right? What we already have recognized is that everything we've been told thus far, and I'm not even saying it was all, from some dark place, right? I think a lot of people were trying to do the best they could. I think a lot of people were hopeful. I think a lot of people were hoping that there would be a way for us to mitigate and a way for us to control this. All we've learned in this time is that we still don't know anything really about the virus, the best way to treat it. We're learning as we go. So how can you mandate things when you still are learning as you go? Up until 2 months ago, we were still being told that if you were vaccinated, there was a 95% efficacy rate that you wouldn't get the disease. And that, what we know now, is not true, never
Right.
has been true, right? And so it's like, dude, the efficacy rate is really that it's going to keep you out of the hospital. And even that isn't true, in certain
Yeah.
circumstances. So it's like, dude, come on. What do we know about this? And why are we forcing people to do something when we really don't know? There's so much we don't know.
And I think that's why the topic that we chose for this week is so important. Science is unreliable. Let's just call it what it is. So I'm a former science believer. I mean, I had faith in science. Science was my God. That's what kind of person I was. And now, hey, I'm a science denier. And I'll wear that badge proudly, only because science is so wildly unreliable. So wildly unreliable.
Right.
I mean, that's the nature of science, is it's constantly in the business of disproving itself.
Right, and there is a difference between science and scientism, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah, I suppose that's true.
And I think that, maybe what you're advocating, what you used to be, was really a believer in scientism, that it was the end-all, be-all answer for everything.
Right, and really it's just rooted in arrogance, because we humans feel like we have the capacity to really know everything and understand everything. But the more that we try to know and understand everything, the more confused we actually get, and the further and further and further from God we get.
Right. And so, Pilgrims, what I would say is, we need to be aware. We need to be careful. We need to be understanding that, I'm not saying don't trust doctors. I'm not saying that you shouldn't put some faith and confidence in faith, obviously meaning human faith here, but some confidence in the work of professionals. We should. If I want to learn how to play a certain chord on a guitar, I'm going to ask Mike, because he understands it, he studies it, he practices it, he knows it, right? I'm not going to dismiss it because he's Mike, right? I'm going to do the opposite because he's earned that. All we're trying to say is that there is so much misinformation, and we're being told that it's only on one side of the fence. It's only Governor DeSantis. It's only Donald Trump. It's only all the Trumpists and all the Trump-tards and whatever other words are leveraged and used to try and undermine humans and their knowledge, right? What we're trying to say is there's only one absolute truth, and that absolute truth is God. And God, through the Holy Spirit, through people being intentional, using our minds, being open-minded to things that we maybe would be closed-minded to around this whole thing. Just do your research, study, know what's going on. Use your intellect. God's given us a brain. We need to use our intellect. What would you say, Mike?
Well, yeah, I agree. Mostly. I think it's also important to have a healthy skepticism of doctors and of science. I'm certainly not one of those Christians that's don't go to the doctor, but also I don't really go to the doctor. I've just had too many experiences where I'm in pain, right? And I go to the doctor and I'm like, hey, I've been in this pain for a month, and I don't know what's going on. Can you guys help me? And then they go, yeah, let's, run some tests. Then they run tests and they go, yeah, we can't figure it out. Just keep an eye on it for another couple weeks. And then they send me home with a $300 bill. And I'm like, why did I even come here in the first place?
What did I gain from this? I almost lost my gallbladder in a very similar story, but.
Oh man. But that's just kind of my point, is that our medical system has turned into, well, it's been a for-profit industry for a long time, and I don't necessarily think that that's bad, but we need to hold our doctors accountable. We need to make sure that we have a good relationship with our doctors, and that our doctors really kind of stand on the same footing that we do. I think it's important to find a doctor that shares your same faith. I
Yeah.
think it's important to find a doctor that that isn't going to just throw the latest treatment down your throat because they're getting paid for it.
Yeah,
So-
or even because it's the consensus, right? Like, how
Right.
much research have they done? Ask questions, demand
Yeah.
answers, right? Not just from your doctors, but from your government.
Right.
Ask questions, demand answers.
True. And, man, I used to think holistic medicine was just a bunch of witchcraft and mumbo jumbo, but considering the way that holistic medicine has been attacked during this COVID thing, I'm starting to think that there might be something to it, because there's really not a lot of money wrapped up in it, and for whatever reason, it just drives people up a wall if you're trying to go with naturalistic treatment. And it seems like a lot of the times naturalistic treatment is kind of the way to go. I mean, the best medicine is a healthy diet, right? So, and I'm just saying all this to just kind of throw stuff out. Like, I mean, Pilgrims, make sure that you're educated. Educate yourself in the field of medicine. And I'm not saying like as a doctor, but I mean, we do live in an information age where, I mean, anything you want to know is really like a search away.
It's available, yeah.
And
it can be vetted.
It
The
can be,
information can
yeah.
be vetted if you take the time. There's no shortcut. I think I saw a meme this week that we even laughed about together that said, I believe the science, and the cat said, no, you don't. You believe what you were told on TV.
Right.
We can't opt for that because what we are being told on TV is not the truth. It's not the full truth. Things will be intentionally omitted, manipulated. And we're not even speaking of one network or whatever. Like everybody has an agenda.
Fox News is compromised too.
So
man.
just do your research, be smart, trust in Jesus. Our hope is in him. Be kind to one another. Don't dismiss people because they disagree with you. And please, please, please understand that science is not the end-all be-all answer. We're not anti-science. We're not anti-vaccination. We're not anti-politics. We're not anti-medicine. We're not anti-doctors. What we are saying is be smart. Don't be manipulated, and be aware, because there are people intentionally trying to manipulate you, and that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, it is a dangerous thing.
Well, and if we had the time, we could probably go on, Mike, talking about this for another hour and a half. But unfortunately, we've come to the end of our show. Pilgrims, what we always say is be aware. Mike and I are not trying to tell you how to think. We're not telling you the only way that you can think, the only way you can respond. That's not our job. Our role in this is to try and say be aware. From a Christian's point of view, we should not only be aware of what's happening in the world around us, but we should always be asking ourselves how Scripture would desire, how God would desire for us to respond and live into the realities of the world in which we live. And so, Pilgrims, be pugnacious. Now is not the time to be indifferent. Now is not the time to be cowardly. Now is the time to be brave, to be bold, to stand up for your convictions. And even if these aren't your convictions, in America, we should still love our neighbor enough to stand up and protect their freedoms and their ability to live into their constitutional liberties, which are given to them and granted to them by God, not their government. We love you all. We hope you have a good week. We'll be praying for you. Please pray for us. And like we always say, until next time, remember that there's a perishing world out there, so do your part to ensure that they're hearing the truth. God bless you, Pilgrims. Stay pugnacious.